The average beachfront condo in Miami now costs well over $500,000. Insurance alone, if you can even find a carrier willing to write the policy, can run $5,000 or $6,000 a year. Layer in property taxes, HOA fees, and the daily overhead of existing in South Florida's cost structure, and retirement near the water stops being a plan and starts being a financial trap. Most people hit that wall, decide Florida is simply out of reach, and start looking at other states. What they don't do is keep looking north. The Florida coast doesn't end at Fort Lauderdale or Clearwater. It runs another 500 miles through the Panhandle and down the Nature Coast, past the crowded tourist corridors, into a stretch of Gulffront territory that barely registers on most national real estate searches. STEINHATCHEE, Cross City, EASTPOINT, WEWAHITCHKA. Places where raw land trades for under $5,000 an acre. Places where a small home on a solar setup can bring monthly housing costs below $900. Places where specific zoning codes still permit you to live on your own private land in a way that has been regulated out of existence almost everywhere else in Florida. This video covers 7 of those towns and the specific strategies that make each one financially viable. Some are about unusually permissive zoning rules that most retirement planners have never heard of. Some are about building approaches that cut construction costs in half. One covers a regulatory window that is slowly starting to close, which makes the timing genuinely relevant, not just rhetorically. There's something worth saying up front about the cheap land assumption, because it trips up a lot of buyers. A $10,000 lot sounds like a solved problem. It isn't. Making raw land legally habitable in Florida, septic system, permits, drainage easement, structure, typically runs between $15,000 and $50,000 before anyone builds a single wall. Every chapter in this video accounts for that reality. The affordable Florida coast still exists. It just moved. Here are affordable off-grid Florida beachside places for cheap affordable living. STEINHATCHEE. STEINHATCHEE sits at the mouth of the STEINHATCHEE River on the Gulf of Mexico in Taylor County. There are no high-rises here, no resort infrastructure. The town runs on fishing, scalloping, and the kind of seasonal rhythm that comes from a community that was never built for tourists. That character is not incidental. It's directly connected to why the cost of living here is what it is. Taylor County has the most permissive RV residency rules in Florida. The county code allows up to 4 permanent RV sites per lot on private land with no legal requirement to ever build a traditional house. In almost every other Florida county, living in an RV on your own property is treated as a temporary measure, permitted only while a permanent home is under active construction, and only for 12 to 18 months. Taylor County never adopted that restriction. Its land use code, shaped by generations of timber and pulp industry culture, still treats the landowner's choice of how to occupy their own land as largely their own business. What that means practically: buy a parcel in or around STEINHATCHEE, place an RV on it, install a solar array and a septic system, and call it home indefinitely. No mortgage cycle, no construction loan, no waiting on a contractor. The capital that would normally go into a build can go directly into infrastructure, solar panels, battery storage, water systems, which is where the long-term cost reduction actually lives. Large acreage tracts near the Econfina Preserve run at roughly $4,841 per acre. The county's median off-grid parcel, around 26 acres, comes in near $84,500. The effective property tax rate sits at 0.72%, and Florida's Save Our Homes cap limits annual taxable value increases to 3% or the Consumer Price Index, whichever is lower. A retiree who establishes primary residency here is protected from being taxed out as surrounding land values rise. The coastal communities of STEINHATCHEE, Keaton Beach, and Delhi Beach give direct Gulf of Mexico access without a single high-rise in sight. STEINHATCHEE's small commercial strip is anchored by the local fishing economy, the kind of infrastructure that keeps food costs manageable. Scalloping season brings short-term traffic, but the community doesn't depend on tourism. It's that the culture here is working coast, not resort coast. The healthcare variable is the honest counterweight. The primary medical resource is the Perry VA community-based outpatient clinic. Functional, but not a full hospital. Residents with ongoing conditions need to factor in the drive to Gainesville or Tallahassee. For a healthy retiree whose goals are Gulf access, land ownership, and the lowest achievable fixed monthly costs, STEINHATCHEE is the most permissive regulatory environment in Florida. Regulatory tightening has already reached several neighboring counties. The window here is open now. Cross City. Cross City is the county seat of Dixie County, positioned near the Suwannee River Delta where the river moves through cypress and marsh before reaching the Gulf. It doesn't have STEINHATCHEE's direct waterfront character, but it has something that matters as much for a retiree building from scratch: a county code that explicitly supports small permanent construction with minimal capital requirements. The minimum dwelling size in Dixie County is 450 square feet. Heated, cooled, and on a permanent foundation. That threshold aligns with Appendix Q of the Florida Building Code, adopted in the 2020 edition to bring tiny homes into the standard residential category. Before Appendix Q, a structure that small occupied a legal gray zone. Inspectors had no consistent checklist. Financing was difficult. Appendix Q resolved that. A structure built to its specifications carries the same legal standing as a conventional 3,000 square foot home, homestead exemption eligibility, permanent residency status, and standard resale rights. The practical on-ramp near Cross City is what the market calls a tiny home shell, an FBC compliant structure that can be moved onto a property and made weather tight for under $30,000. The resident moves in, then adds solar panels and rainwater collection as the budget allows. Agricultural and rural zones in Dixie County carry no HOA requirements and no deed restrictions on most parcels. The incremental approach matters in an era of high construction costs and labor shortages. Move in with a minimal compliant structure, occupy the land, and improve over time. A 39-acre parcel near Old Town, just north of Cross City, has listed at $317,600, significant until you calculate cost per acre. The county's per capita tax levy is $929, near the lower third of Florida's 67 counties. Water infrastructure surprises buyers. The shallow aquifer keeps well drilling costs between $5,000 and $15,000, but shallow aquifers require real filtration systems to manage bacterial content and mineral concentrations. Budget for it before purchase. Permanent RV residency requires a special exception permit, a discretionary approval, not a guaranteed right, for retirees who want land first, small structure second, and off-grid upgrades over time. Cross City offers a realistic progression that a growing number of Florida counties have removed from the available options entirely. WEWAHITCHKA. Cape San Blas is one of the more pristine stretches of Gulf Beach remaining in Florida. White quartz sand, clear water, flanked by State Park on both sides. Port St. Joe, the Gulf County seat, has a median home value around $232,600. That's not astronomical by Florida coastal standards, but it's well above what most retirees on a fixed income are targeting. WEWAHITCHKA sits 20 to 30 minutes inland from that coastline, and the financial distance between the two towns is significantly larger than the geographic one. Gulf County's land use code permits permanent RV residency throughout the unincorporated county, with one significant exception: properties inside the coastal construction corridor trigger expensive engineering requirements. Elevated pilings, impact-rated glazing, flood-resistant materials. WEWAHITCHKA sits outside that corridor entirely. Land price drops, build cost drops, insurance cost drops. The beach remains a short drive. The town sits along the Dead Lakes, a freshwater system created by the natural flooding of the Chipola River. The area produces Tupelo honey, harvested from trees that grow in the river floodplain, which reflects the ecological productivity of the surrounding land. The same soil conditions support kitchen gardens in a way the coastal substrate typically cannot. Monthly housing costs in the WEWAHITCHKA area average $936, 22% below the national average. Total monthly expenses for a single person in Gulf County run around $1,973. The property tax rate is 0.7%. For a retiree drawing Social Security or a modest pension, that structure is manageable in a way that Port St. Joe itself is not. The differentiator that separates WEWAHITCHKA from more remote rural options is medical access. Sacred Heart Gulf in Port St. Joe is a full-service hospital within 30 minutes. For a retiree managing a chronic condition, that proximity closes a gap that stays open in Taylor County and most of the deeper Panhandle wilderness. You are not on the beach, you are near it. For retirees who've thought honestly about that difference, WEWAHITCHKA turns an otherwise unaffordable coastal county into one of the more practical retirement options in the state. EASTPOINT. Apalachicola is one of the last functioning fishing towns left in Florida. Oyster boats still come in off the bay. The downtown hardware store is still open. The architecture hasn't been replaced by condominiums. East Point sits directly across the bay, connected by a short causeway. It doesn't carry Apalachicola's reputation, but it carries something more useful for the budget-conscious buyer. Land prices that still reflect working coast reality. Wooded interior lots near Tate's Hell State Forest trade between $20,000 and $45,000. The R2 zoning district in Franklin County allows site-built structures and mobile homes at a minimum of 450 square feet, one of the lowest floor area thresholds in any coastal Florida county. The variable most buyers skip over is flood zone classification, and certain higher elevation parcels in East Point carry a Zone X designation, outside the high-risk flood area. That classification removes the requirement for mandatory flood insurance, reduces engineered foundation elevation requirements, and simplifies permitting. In a state where flood zone classification can double the cost of ownership, a Zone X parcel on the coast is a material financial event. Wind is a different story. Any structure within 1 mile of the coastal mean high water line must withstand 180 mile/hour wind loads. Impact-rated windows or hurricane shutters are required, but construction choices make a measurable difference. A metal roof with a hip design and a secondary water resistance layer qualifies for mitigation discounts with Citizens Property Insurance, reducing annual premiums by up to 29%. The building decision and the insurance cost are directly linked. Retirees who understand that connection before they build pay less every year after. Citizens implemented a rate structure in 2025 that caps primary residence increases at 14% annually, bounded and predictable, which is functionally different from the unlimited exposure that comes with unregulated coastal insurance markets elsewhere. The Franklin County millage rate runs approximately $10.60 per $1,000 of assessed value. Combined with Zone X flood status, quality construction, and the homestead exemption's 3% assessment cap, the long-term cost of ownership in East Point can stabilize in a way that most coastal Florida properties cannot. CHIEFLAND. Cedar Key is the town that gets the attention in Levy County. Small island community, Gulf views, a functioning clam aquaculture economy that has kept the authentic character oi. A lot on the island lists around $12,500 for under half an acre. That entry price sounds accessible until you account for storm surge exposure, coastal construction compliance costs, and the scarcity of available parcels. The island geography creates a supply ceiling the market has already priced in. CHIEFLAND is the practical alternative. Sitting about 30 minutes inland from Cedar Key, it anchors the unincorporated mainland zone where 1.258 acre wooded parcels trade between $15,000 and $24,000. That position puts a retiree within a short drive of Cedar Key's waterfront and Gulf fishery without the island's insurance exposure or construction requirements. The soil around CHIEFLAND is different from the sandy, saline-affected substrate that characterizes most coastal Florida land. Organic content and moisture retention support food production in a way that most coastal parcels cannot. For a retiree trying to offset food costs through a kitchen garden or small growing operation, that distinction shows up in the off-grid cost calculation in ways that don't appear on a standard cost of living spreadsheet. Florida's property tax exemption for renewable energy systems improves the solar math here directly. A solar array does not increase the property's assessed value for tax purposes. And Florida produces roughly 1,446 kilowatt hours per year per kilowatt of installed solar capacity. A 9 kilowatt system, after the federal 30% tax credit, costs around $19,908 and generates over $2,000 in annual savings against grid pricing. Over 25 years, off-grid solar in Florida costs around 8.7 cents per kilowatt hour, compared to the state grid average of 15.3 cents. The solar system is not an add-on. It's what converts cheap land into genuinely low-cost living. Levy County limits RV stays to 180 days within licensed parks. The viable path from CHIEFLAND is permanent construction, a code-compliant structure with a solar system that eliminates the utility bill over time. The healthcare anchor is Malcolm Randall VA Medical Center in Gainesville, 45 to 60 minutes away. For a rural lifestyle in Florida, that proximity to a major VA facility is exceptional, and it's the concrete reason CHIEFLAND makes more practical sense for a retiring population than deeper wilderness counties where land prices are similar, but acute care is a meaningfully longer drive. MARIANNA. Panama City Beach and Destin are world class. The water is turquoise in a way that photographs accurately. If you've looked at property prices in Walton County or Bay County recently, you also understand why access is becoming structurally limited to people with significant capital. Marianna, the county seat of Jackson County, is 45 to 60 minutes inland from that coastline, and the financial gap between the two is the entire basis of the strategy here. Agricultural lots in the Marianna area run as low as $14,900 per acre. A half-acre multifamily lot lists around $39,995. The effective property tax rate in Jackson County is 0.67%. Yet the per capita tax levy is $695, ranking 65th out of 67 Florida counties. These are not rounding error differences from the state average. They translate into structurally different monthly budgets over the course of a retirement. Building codes in this inland panhandle region permit container homes and mobile units on appropriately zoned parcels. A used 20-foot shipping container runs approximately $3,029. A complete container home build in north central Florida runs between $40,495 and $59,331, a total that includes structure, foundation, and systems, and compares favorably against the median home price in almost any Florida coastal county. Beachside, Marianna sits entirely outside the coastal construction corridor, eliminating expensive pilings, impact-rated glazing, and elevated foundation requirements. Insurance premiums are significantly lower for the same reason. No direct storm surge exposure. That actuarial difference compounds over a retirement spanning 2 or 3 decades in ways that don't register on a single-year budget comparison, but become substantial over time. Spring-fed rivers and lakes throughout the region provide fresher groundwater than the brackish coastal wells affected by saltwater intrusion near the Gulf. For a solar plus well plus septic configuration, the terrain here is more cooperative than the coastal fringe. The Marianna VA Clinic provides accessible primary care for veterans in the region. The inland strategy works when a retiree has made an honest distinction between needing daily beach access and wanting occasional access. A property owner in Marianna can drive to Panama City Beach in under an hour. On a fixed income, that math becomes harder to dismiss the longer you look at it. OCALA. Building an off-grid homestead from raw land is not a passive process. The infrastructure lists, well, septic system, solar array, structure, permits, drainage easements. Totals between $15,000 and $50,000 before any walls go up. A $10,000 lot in a rural county realistically requires $40,000 to $60,000 in total setup costs before it functions as a legal primary residence. That gap between listed land price and actual viable cost is consistent enough across Florida's rural counties to treat as a fixed planning variable, not an exception. For retirees who want the financial benefits of small footprint living without the logistical weight of a raw land bill, OCALA offers a different entry model through established tiny home communities operating on the outskirts of the city. Most notably, Simple Life, a community built around park model homes on permanent foundations. These developments have already absorbed the regulatory process: zoning approvals, sub 400 square foot dwelling permits, utility agreements. Residents pay lot rent and occupy land where all the legal complexity is already resolved. The community functions as a cleared path that would otherwise require years of individual effort to create. Simple Life's lot rents run between $350 and $450 per month. That is the total housing cost. No property tax bill, no insurance premium on land you own, no septic permit process. For a retiree working from Social Security and a modest savings base. That number creates a monthly budget that is genuinely workable. The off-grid layer is still accessible within this model. Residents can install personal solar panels and rainwater collection systems on top of the park's legal framework. The community handles zoning compliance. The resident handles equipment decisions. Some residents in communities like Simple Life achieve near-complete utility independence while operating inside a fully compliant residential structure, paying lot rent as their primary housing cost while generating their own power and harvesting supplemental water. The combination pushes total monthly overhead into a range that few housing options anywhere in the country can match. OCALA's location adds a dimension that separates it from the more isolated rural towns on this list. The city has hospital infrastructure, retail access, and a medical services ecosystem that STEINHATCHEE, Cross City, and WEWAHITCHKA cannot replicate. For retirees who need regular specialist care, proximity to a full urban medical network is not a secondary concern. It's often the deciding factor in whether a rural lifestyle is sustainable at all. OCALA resolves that concern without requiring the retiree to pay urban housing costs. The community sits outside the coastal storm surge zone on higher ground, which removes mandatory flood insurance from the equation and keeps the insurance picture simple. The social dimension of the community model also carries practical value that is easy to underestimate on paper. Solo off-grid living in Taylor County or Dixie County is genuinely isolating for residents who aren't prepared for it. In a dedicated tiny home community, these neighbors share direct knowledge about solar system maintenance, water filtration performance, and code navigation. That shared knowledge shortens the learning curve and reduces the cost of first-year mistakes. Mistakes that, on a raw land build, can run into the thousands of dollars before the resident knows enough to avoid them. The honest limitation remains equity. Lot rent builds no ownership stake. If management changes or rent increases, the resident's position is less protected than a landowner's. For retirees whose primary financial goal is an appreciating asset, the land purchase model in Taylor or Dixie County offers more long-term certainty. But for retirees testing a smaller lifestyle before committing to a raw land build, or those who have decided that low fixed monthly costs matter more than equity accumulation at this stage of life, OCALA's community model is one of the most financially rational entries on this entire list. At $350 to $450 a month in housing costs inside a city with full medical access, the case for it is straightforward. Lay all 7 towns side by side and a clear pattern emerges. The affordable Florida coast didn't disappear. It moved north and west, and it got quieter. It traded high-rises for fishing docks, resort infrastructure for low zoning ordinances, and easy real estate transactions for the kind of regulatory research that most buyers don't want to do. Every town in this video required a specific strategy, a zoning code read carefully, a flood map checked before purchase, a construction decision made with the insurance premium in mind. The people making it work are the ones who did that work before they bought. The infrastructure investment running through most of these towns, solar array, well, septic system, code compliant structure, is not a cost in the traditional sense. It's a conversion. And it takes a cheap piece of land and turns it into a living situation where the monthly overhead is structurally low, not temporarily low. A 9-kilowatt solar system running at Florida's solar efficiency replaces a utility bill for 25 years at a fraction of grid pricing. A well and septic system replace municipal services indefinitely. The initial capital is real, often between $15,000 and $50,000 on top of the land price. But once it's in place, it eliminates recurring costs that compound over a retirement spanning 20 or 30 years. That math favors the retiree who builds it and stays. The insurance picture is more navigable than it appears from outside. Citizens Property Insurance Cap's primary residence increases at 14% annually. Real, but bounded. Construction quality and metal roofs, hip designs, secondary water resistance directly reduces premiums by up to 29%. That discount isn't a loyalty reward, it's the policy's response to a structure that demonstrably survives Florida's wind events better than standard builds. Zone X parcel selection in towns like EASTPOINT eliminates mandatory flood coverage entirely. None of these are passive outcomes. They result from specific decisions made at the point of purchase and construction, which is exactly why understanding them before buying matters more than discovering them afterward. The regulatory window is the variable that doesn't appear on a cost of living chart, but shapes everything else. STEINHATCHEE sits in Taylor County, yet one of the last Florida jurisdictions where permanent RV residency on private land is explicitly written into the standard land use code. Putnam County and Liberty County both updated their ordinances in 2024 to eliminate that option. Counties that had been permissive for years, where buyers had built plans around those rules. What looked like settled policy changed at the county commission level with limited public notice. That pattern doesn't make Taylor County's current rules permanent. It makes them current, which is a different thing. Florida HB 557 represents the counterweight. Legislation under review that would legally redefine movable tiny homes as year-round permanent dwellings, provided they meet building code standards and pass third-party inspection. If passed and widely adopted, well, it would allow the mobility of an RV with the full legal standing of a site-built house. a combination that doesn't exist anywhere in Florida's current residential code framework. For retirees planning a move more than a year or two out, tracking that legislation is worth the effort. It could meaningfully expand the options in counties that have already restricted standard RV residency. What holds across all 7 towns is this: the combination of low land prices, permissive zoning, solar resources, and accessible infrastructure that makes off-grid coastal retirement viable in Florida is still present, but it's concentrated in a narrow geographic band that most buyers aren't looking at. South Florida's coast didn't get unaffordable because the underlying lifestyle disappeared. It got unaffordable because density, development pressure, and insurance exposure compounded on each other until the math stopped working for anyone without significant capital. That same pressure is moving north, slowly, but it's moving. The towns in this video are ahead of it right now. Whether they stay that way depends on the same forces that already transformed the coast everyone knows by name.